it looked kind of okay. And then you're pretty close to
I'd like to welcome all of you here for this wonderful occasion. And right after medical screenings, we're going to proceed with the wedding. So this is both a joyous and a solemn moment. It's joyous because of the possibilities that lie out before Leah and Michael. It's joyous because of the ways in which God has worked to bring them together. It's solemn because the sacred vows that they're going to take before God and before us, the real sense in which we enter into these vows with them. There's a real sense in which we pledge to them by our presence, our support, our encouragement, our prayers, that we will not abandon them even as they do not abandon each other. So it's a wonderful moment. Michael, Leah, we are excited for you, happy for you. But you all bow with me in prayer, after which Jamie is going to come and read. Lord, we are grateful in Michael's life to prepare them for this moment, Lord, to bring them together, to pour out your grace on them in a way that allows them today to have their lives woven together as they become one. So we commit this ceremony into your hands and into your purposes, and we ask your blessing on Michael and Leah. We pray these things in the name of Jesus, our Savior, and for his sake and for the sake of his kingdom. Amen.
Complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourself. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others. Have this mind among yourselves, being born in the likeness of men. In being found in human form, he humbled himself by being obedient to the point of death. The death that I can confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, the glory of God. First Corinthians 13:45. Love is patient. Love does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and very false.
So I love the passages of scripture that we both identified associate with marriage and with weddings. The passage from 1 Corinthians 13. I like to take those passages that we associate with one context that, at least in the Bible, are not restricted to that context, right? So I like to take 1 Corinthians 13 and use it to talk about love of neighbor, our love of our Muslim neighbors in particular. And I like to take Philippians 2 to talk about marriage because we often don't associate that wonderful passage in Philippians 2. We don't often think of that as a marriage text, but wow, what a great text. Because it lays down, what Paul is trying to do as he writes to the Philippians. You work out your salvation with fear and trembling because it's God who's at work in you to will and to accomplish his good purposes. But the suggestion in that verse is that Christ worked out his salvation through this pattern of behavior. And now we should work out our salvation through that same pattern of behavior, because that's a pattern of behavior that God works in and through. So when we look at that wonderful passage that Paul gives in Philippians 2, he talks about a pattern that involves, first of all, self-emptying. Seems to live in a society that actually sanctions that. And if that's what it looks like to follow Christ in any context, surely in the context of marriage, a pattern of self-emptying will serve that marriage well. If there's any context in which we should not be full of ourselves, but should empty ourselves and regard the other person as more important than ourselves, surely marriage is that context. There's also a pattern in that passage of humility. Christ humbled himself, Paul says, and took the form of a servant. And so really there are two elements of that pattern, right? There's the pattern of humility and the pattern of servanthood. And again, this is what it looks like to follow Christ, who modeled humility for us. Again, we seem to be in a society that rewards arrogance. But to cultivate humility in any aspect of our marriage, we ought to approach one another in humility. In marriage, we all bring baggage into that relationship, right? And we are all susceptible to hurt and to misunderstanding. And I don't know anything that will give us grace to navigate all of that more than just cultivating humility and cultivating servanthood. It's really interesting that the person in all of history who most deserves to be served themselves cast themselves in the role of a servant, who served those around him, served his own disciples. Like takes a wash basin and begins to wash his disciples' feet. And Peter, of course, says, well, there's no way. You're never going to wash my feet. And Jesus says, Peter, if I don't wash your feet, you don't have any part in me and my kingdom. And then Peter, in a typical sort of Peter fashion, says, well, give me a bath. And Jesus says, Peter, you don't need a bath. Just need your feet washed. And Jesus washed his feet. You know who else's feet Jesus washed? Judas, which suggests to me that when it comes to this matter of serving one another in humility, it has nothing to do with merit, right? We serve one another out of love. We serve one another even when we feel deep down the other person doesn't deserve it. In the same way that Jesus washed his disciples' feet when they didn't deserve it, washed Judas's feet when Judas didn't deserve it. And so my encouragement to you is to wash one another's feet, to nurture one another, care for one another, build one another up. Even in those times when you feel that the other person doesn't deserve it. There's also a pattern in this passage that Paul calls us to emulate, a pattern of obedience to God. That Christ emptied himself, took the form of a servant, and became obedient, even to the point of death, even death on a cross. So it's this picture of ultimate obedience. And Paul challenges us to that kind of life of obedience to God. And I believe your lives will be better, your marriage will be better if both of you cultivate that spirit of obedience to God that we see patterned for us by Jesus. And then finally, in that pattern of obedience, there's a pattern of sacrifice. That when Christ was obedient, even to the point of death, even death on the cross, it was because he was laying down his life in an act of sacrifice. And I invite, as you set for us, to others.
You are gentle with me always. You are strong and fair. You are selfless, generous, and you bring gifts without before these witnesses, I promise to always be your best friend. I will laugh with you and take you testimonies. I will always thank God for you, and I will never stop praying for you. I will stand with you.
Michael, I believe you have some vows to read as well.
I, Michael, take you, Leah, to be my forever. I promise to treasure you and always be a source of safety, security, and consistency in my life. To be kind, forgiving, and endlessly selfless in all things. I promise to lead our togetherness with my eyes on the cross and by putting you before myself always. To support your dreams and be by your side no matter what. I promise to love you until the day I die, healthy or sick, rich or poor. I will love you through all things. Before God, I vow to love, honor, and serve you for as long as I live, freely giving you my whole heart, my whole life.
And you have some rings to share as a sign of your commitment to Jesus. And Michael, if you will take Leah's hand and repeat after me this pledge, which you will keep as God gives you grace. With this ring,
With this ring,
I pledge my undying love,
I pledge my undying love,
my unyielding companionship,
unwavering support,
my persevering trust
persevering trust
throughout our shared journey of life. Leah, you'll take Michael's ring in his hand. Repeat this pledge that you will keep by God's grace. With this ring,
With this ring,
I pledge my undying love, my unwavering companionship, my unyielding support my persevering trust. In dying prayer, in which they become one. We commit them into your care, your protection, your blessing, your empowering. And we pray that, Michael, would you like to kiss your Bible? Please do. And I present to you, Mr. and Mrs.